Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path and picking up where we left off at the end of the Humffray River Track. So from there, we're about to head up the Hart Spur Track. Never driven this before. Troopy Matt recommended this one, so looking forward to that. By all accounts, it's a reasonably steep climb, and then we're going to go out the Hart Spur Track to the Mt Hart summit, which is a one-way track, and return along the Mt Hart Track to then take Tea Tree Spur Track, which is a very long spur track, even longer than Sarah Spur, which I've done several times. It's a good 20 odd kilometres, this one, down towards the Wongungarra River, and look to get a campsite down here somewhere. So it's a bit of an action-packed stint, this one. The weather closes in. As you know, if you watched the last video or two in this series, I was getting over COVID, so this is the end of day one. I'm really tired. But importantly, we all do get there and find camp. So, look, without any further ado, guys, let's get into it. Okay, guys, here we are, heading off from the end of the Humffray River Track. You can see there the sign saying Humffray River Track on the left, Wombat Range Track on the right-hand side, and we're heading up towards there. So this first section is shared between the Hart Spur Track and the Wombat Range Track. There's a little seasonal closure gate up here. Always exciting driving tracks that we've never driven before. I've certainly never driven this track before, and I don't think any of the guys with me on this trip had driven it before either. It was recommended to us by Troopy Matt, who unfortunately wasn't able to make this trip. He drove this in an 80 series probably 5 years ago. Very different track back then from what I understand. It was pretty rocky and some big steps. There's the seasonal closure gate that I just mentioned, and you can see it's on the other side of the seasonal closure gate that you've got the Wombat Range Track there on the right, and we continue straight here on the Hart Spur Track. So Hart Spur and Wombat Range are not seasonally closed, where Humffray River and Wongungarra certainly is. So in theory, if you wanted to in winter, you could come up over Selwyn and down the Mt Hart Track, probably to Mount Sarah first, and continue past Mount Sarah onto Mt Hart Track, down the Hart Spur Track, and over the Wombat Range Track if you wanted to. In winter, I'd be choosing my day to do that carefully. So yeah, as I was saying, Troopy Matt recommended this, and he remembered it as a fairly steep, rocky climb in sections. So we were certainly keen to see what the track had to offer. Started off nice and gentle. The odd tree fall, as you can see, which is pretty common in the high country, and the tracks sort of evolve around them. Nice little camp spot there, just as we're coming up towards a crossing of one of the little streams that feed into the Humffray River Track. So there's a lot of these little streams up in the high country, and they all work their way, forming bigger and bigger rivers. Not a difficult crossing. A little bit steep on the entry and exit, so take it nice and steady, but nothing to really be concerned about. Certainly not deep enough to wet your tyres, maybe. That's about it. Apologies for that moisture on the case of the GoPro. It was the beginning of a few light spits of rain, and we were a little concerned as to what that might mean. So you can see here's Dan just crossing through that same crossing. Some footage here from Luca in the GU. We did get the sense that this track isn't necessarily driven a whole lot. You can see some of these sections, particularly the bush was quite enclosing and pretty close. Other sections like this, it's more open. The track did tend to be off camber at times. Nothing terribly difficult about it though, nothing that's really made you think this was a very difficult track. As I said, I think it's been graded, I'm pretty sure, since Troopy Matt last drove it. There were no rock steps or anything like that to be concerned about, but definitely some off camber sections. You can see the angle there on the bonnet of the vehicle as it come around that little corner. So slow and steady wins the race for a track that's only 5 k's long. It certainly had plenty to offer us, that's for sure. see there Paul and the FJ and Dan in the Iron Emu, Prado and Luca coming up in the GU Patrol, all making good progress. Very much a clay base in sections, so nice and hard packed when it's dry, but if you did get caught out here in the rain, it'd be a very different situation, I believe, and it was certainly something we were keeping an eye on. That sky doesn't necessarily show up there in the footage. It was getting kind of dark and we had the first few spits of rain, so we were a little bit concerned as to what that might mean. You can see Luca there just starting to run the wipers a little bit. We're just hoping to get to the top before we got any serious rain. You can see this section also, not a lot of slope here, but getting steeper as we get up here a little further, but very much a clay base. So yeah, definitely time, low range, and drop down a gear or two. As I said, the footage never does this justice, but this was reasonably steep. A little bit loose, but quite manageable. Definitely looked like an easier line on the left-hand side, so that's the line I took. Definitely looked a bit looser on the right-hand side. I guess it's one of those spots that would provide an opportunity for overtaking if you did happen to meet somebody coming the other way, because not a lot of spots on this track. You can see here a lot of rock, so small little rock steps. I imagine that they were quite different back in the day. And you can see just how much each of the vehicles are sort of stirring that up, coming up over those rocks with the loose dirt on them. Everybody's sort of choosing their own adventure, choosing their own line. And making pretty good progress doing it. You can see there the angle the 90 series is getting to, just going around the corner. As I mentioned, a lot of the sections here are pretty off camber, and you don't always appreciate it until you actually see the vehicle from the outside like that. The on-car footage with the GoPro tends to smooth that out, but if you watch the bonnet there and watch the angle that the car gets to at certain sections, you get a little bit of an appreciation for what's going on there. Definitely some good climbing sections through here. And you can see there Dan just spitting a few rocks out as he's working his way up this little hill that turns into the next bit of the big hill. And this was reasonably gravelly through here. There wasn't too much of a defined worn path. It was very much a case of just keep your throttle steady and let the vehicle and tyres do their work. There was an opportunity along a few sections of the track here like this where you did get a bit of a view, which was always nice to enjoy. As you can see, no opportunity here for overtaking really. And although there's sections like this that flatten out a little bit, you kind of, the whole way along this track, you're climbing pretty much the entire time. So as I mentioned, the Hart Spur Track is about 5 kilometres long, and at the bottom of the Hart Spur Track we're starting off at about 450 metres above sea level, and when we get to the top we're at about 1100, 1200 in some sections, but let's call it 1100. So from 450 to 1100, that's a rise of 750 metres over 5 kilometres. So I guess similar to Water Spur Track, it is quite a steep track. And yeah, we're just getting ready for that final climb. You can see here it's a pretty well graded track. And a fairly steady climb to boot. Here's the guys coming up that same section.
Still on Hart Spur Track.
Paul and the FJ in front, followed by Dan and Luca again. And you can see the cars are moving around a fair bit. Everybody's taking sort of a slightly different line.
Video does not do this justice.
And that's Luke, you can hear there saying the video does not do this justice, because it certainly doesn't. This is pretty steep, this last section. You can see fairly well rutted there as well. And a nice rocky climb on this next bit. But we all managed to find traction where we needed to. And again, considering the 76 still running those road terrains with open diffs.
Choosing the opposite line to you and then deciding whether I should have taken the other one. It's a learning exercise.
Bit of discussion there amongst the guys as to what line to take. Paul's very good at picking the right line, and his FJ's super capable. He always makes everything look easy. You can see here this section's reasonably off camber, and a good steady climb. As I mentioned, I don't think this track gets necessarily a lot of traffic. And for most of the 5 kilometres of this track, we're going up. Still see evidence of when the bushfires came through here a few years ago at the end of 2019. Little twisty section before the top of the Hart Spur Track here. Again, bit of dust getting thrown up from the tyres. Quite a steady run. So look, I mean, if you're looking for a good track to drive, I definitely recommend the Hart Spur Track. We certainly all enjoyed it. If you like steep, steady rock climbs, and as I said, this, apart from being steep, this is not a difficult track, at least in our opinion, in the conditions that we drove it at the time. Again, you can see the bush is fairly well closed in here, making me think it doesn't get a lot of traffic. rises here, a few ruts starting to form. So I think give it a couple of years it'll be a very different track, but right now, very, very drivable. And then just like that, you pop out at the top. So that's the Mt Hart Track that we've come to. So we're turning a hard right here to get onto the summit track to head out to the Mt Hart summit. Left takes you on the Mt Hart Track back towards Tea Tree Spur, and then if you keep going past that, ultimately back towards Mount Sarah. But we're turning right here. It's a 3-kilometre run out to the Mt Hart summit, which is at 1,260 metres. And yeah, look, it's one of those things. The one-way tracks in the high country tend not to be driven quite so much as some of the other tracks, because if you drive out there, you know you're driving back. But it's always nice to explore, and particularly the various summits and trig points. I like to get to as many of them as I can. So I was keen, even though it was sort of late in the day. You know, caution might have said the right thing to do was to push on and perhaps try and get to our campsite down by the river, but who knows when we'll be back here. You know, there's so many places to explore. It could be some time before we get back this way. So everybody was happy enough to take the 3K deviation and head out there. And again, this track didn't look like it gets a lot of traffic. A lot of sections of it sort of starting to grow over the track a little bit. You can see, you know, grass in the middle of the track as well. It's all a fair indication that not a lot of vehicles necessarily come down here. And yeah, pretty well overgrown in various sections of the
GPS
track.
was starting to deviate away from the track.
Yeah, noticed that a bit.
So yeah, much the same for the guys coming along behind me, negotiating their way through the overgrown brush. And that's the thing, like if you don't come and drive these tracks, you know, they may end up getting fully closed over. And 3Ks is not such a long run, so almost at the summit here we've come into a clearing and into a second clearing here. Just trying to figure out whether this is the summit or do we push on a little bit further. The next area looked a lot more open, so pushed on through to there. I'm pretty sure that was the helipad that's noted at the top of Mt Hart. Nice open area here, well cleared. So obviously there's a lot of helipads on mountaintops around the high country for emergency rescue and those sorts of things. And you do get a little bit of a view from up here. Well, here we are, Mt Hart summit. I guess the actual summit's probably just back up there where it's slightly higher, but this is the cleared area for the helipad on Mt Hart. There's no trig point up here. There is a bit of a view. That's probably out to about the southeast, and a bit of a view back towards Wongungarra if you're up a little higher. Weather looks like it's going to close in. We're heading down into that valley down there to find a camp spot on the river. The other two should be here soon. So yeah, Luca and Dan went too far behind Paul and I, and everybody pulled up, stretched their legs, and pretty quick we were mobile again, knowing we still had a ways to go, and we were rapidly losing light. On the way out here, I did happen to notice there actually was a trig point, as you saw with that note on screen. There it is there, see the trig point hidden away a little bit. So yeah, there is actually a trig point here up on Mt Hart, just not super visible on the way in, a lot more noticeable on the way back out. So we drove the 3Ks back to the intersection, which is where we are now. So that's the Mt Hart Spur Track we came up on the left. And we're heading essentially north here. It's about a 4-kilometre run to the top of the Tea Tree Spur Track that we'll head down to get down to the river and find ourselves a campsite on the Wongungarra River. So we're essentially up on top of ridgeline here, so this section of track's not steep or anything. It's a pretty good run, and the track itself was in pretty good nick as well. The odd branch here or there on the track, of course. But yeah, generally speaking, we're making good time, heading along at a reasonable clip, probably 30 k's an hour or so. Another one of those tracks that looks like it doesn't get a lot of traffic, and there wouldn't be a huge amount of places where you could easily overtake if you did happen to encounter somebody coming the other way. But as I said, not too far, just 3Ks and we've reached the top of the Tea Tree Spur Track. So turning right here to head down the Tea Tree Spur, it's a good 20 odd kilometres, probably a bit more than that in the end. And you can see with some moisture there on the case for the Hero GoPro, that yeah, we were starting to get a few spits of rain. First couple of Ks of the Tea Tree Spur does start off pretty gentle, and it's probably halfway along before it starts to get steep. And yeah, apologies for the water there on the case. I did try and minimise the number of shots that I used that had water on there, but yeah, we're certainly starting to spit more and more the further we were getting, and we're trying to maintain a reasonable pace. But yeah, before very long the weather well and truly set in. So this track is largely a clay base. So once this rain really set in, it was a case of slow and steady. Look, on these horizontal sections like this, we're making reasonable time still, but the minute we started descending, really slow and steady to maintain that control. You can see the little rivers starting to form on the track, and we still had a long way to go. It's not the kind of weather you want to find yourself up at elevation looking to descend. It's amazing Dan still comes on trips with me, because this is the second time I've done this to him. If you've been a long time follower of the channel, you'll remember Dan and I got caught up on Mount Gibbo and Mount Pinnabar in some weather. So here we are descending, and that rain's just gotten heavier and heavier. So some footage here from Luca with the FJ in front, and then Dan in the Iron Emu, and me just in front of Paul. A little bit hard to see in these shots, you might catch a glimpse of me here and there, but very slow and steady. You can see how much water there is actually on the track. This was just nuts. There was just rain everywhere.
End of day one, working our way down Tea Tree Spur. Yep, the rain's beaten us. So still got a ways to go. I reckon we've got another 400 metres or something at least to descend before we get down to the river level. Yeah, she's pretty wet.
So you can probably see the time there on my phone mounted on the dash, 6:41 PM, and this is what we're doing. Yeah, no, look, really slow and steady just to maintain the control here. It took us quite a long time to get down this track in these conditions, but that was the whole aim, was to get down in one piece. Again, you can just see the amount of water on the track there. Very steep drop off on the right hand side. There really wasn't a huge margin for error here in these conditions, and taking it slow and steady was the only safe option. You build up a bit of momentum in these conditions, and you're not stopping. That was the concern, particularly in my case with the road terrains that I was running. And I wasn't feeling great. You probably heard my voice before on that bit of in-car footage that was recorded, because my GoPro 8 had run out of battery by this point. I wasn't trying to stop here.
Yep, here we are going down.
Feel more on that.
Look at that water running on the track.
And you can see that river forming on the track here.
Look at that runoff. Yeah. I mean, you know that's why you get the muddy. It's the muddy you don't get more ruts in the track. Yeah, those mounts they put on there is not high enough. Yeah. This one's working.
So you can see where the humps are. It's diverting a lot of the water off the track, and it's very quickly just forming into rivulets again on the other side.
This is what we're driving down. Far out.
And yeah, you can see there, maybe through that bumpy footage, the track just looks like a river.
Tea Tree Spur Track. Almost in the dark, in the rain. This footage is going to be jerky as. She's bumpy. Anyway. Slow and steady.
You can see there, that's nearly 7 o'clock.
Not much else we can do. This has really set in since we headed off from the top up on the Hart Spur Track, or the Mt Hart Track.
So yeah, slowly working
Now
our way
this.
down. Jerky camera work there, but trying to steer and drive and hold the camera at the same time.
Well, managed to get out of that river.
And I was sort of stuck in those ruts there, and I didn't really want to come down all the way.
I missed it, but the ruts are okay. Oh, Dan was going down sideways.
Heard on the radio there, Dan was going down sideways. Like, there really wasn't a lot of traction here, guys. It was super important that we keep the speed of the vehicles slow and steady. These are far from ideal conditions to be descending a steep track like this. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, maybe we should have camped up at the Mt Hart summit and left this for the next day, but that's not what we did.
Well, we're pretty much down near the river now, so with any luck we might find a campsite. Let's see how we go. There's the Wongungarra River. She's flowing pretty well. We're still looking for a campsite. The track is absolutely wet. Anyway, let's see.
So here we are, guys. 7:30. We've found a campsite.
We found camp.
Thanks everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this next instalment.
On the edge of the
yeah, look,
All coming
I'll
in now.
fill you in on the next video about camp this night, and
got a spot
you
in
know,
there.
I didn't bring in all my camping
Don't know what I'm
gear,
gonna do,
but this is
because
an
I
awesome
know
trip.
my swag
Hope you've enjoyed the
and
video.
foam
See you in the next
mattress are
one.
gonna
Like
be
the video if you
absolutely
liked it.
soaked
Leave a
through.
comment down below, and please think about subscribing to the channel if you enjoy our content. That's what really helps us grow and develop the channel. See you in the next video, guys.
But yeah, we'll figure it out.